What is the difference between Seventh-day Adventists and Seventh-day Reform Adventists?
You are loading the questions here. Is this a question that you received?
Yeah, this is just the questions that I receive. And
Okay, what is the difference between an Adventist and a Seventh-day Reform Adventist? Well, the original church that arose out of the great disappointment in the Millerite movement eventually was the Seventh-day Adventist Church, who realized that God's commandments were binding and that Christ was indeed going to come, but that they'd misunderstood the sanctuary element of the message. Christ wasn't going to come at that time to restore the earth.
Yeah.
He was going into the next phase of the ministry in the heavenly sanctuary, and once that was completed, he would return. That's the Seventh-day Adventist movement. It had a beginning, and it will continue to the end. Now, just like Israel of old, is this a perfect church?
No.
Don't shake your head so violently. What's wrong with you? You should be standing up for them and saying, yes.
Well, you mentioned earlier, all have fallen short to the glory of God.
Okay.
So, yeah,
All right.
They're not perfect.
We're not perfect.
No.
In fact, if you want to, let's not go there. Some of us are just less perfect than others, and some of them make a determined effort to try and be less perfect than others. All right, so this church has its ups and downs, and it has the wheat in it, and it has tares in it, and the wheat and the tares will remain for how long?
Until the end.
Okay. Are their decisions that they make always of the highest standard?
No, unfortunately not.
No, their decisions aren't always of the highest standard. Could some within the ranks be upset with some of the decisions that are sometimes made?
Definitely.
Or some of the examples that are set?
Yes,
this is part of human nature. It's the part of the fallen nature. So what happened was the Reform Adventists, in Germany in particular, they were extremely disheartened and upset when the church basically capitulated to the power of the Nazi regime by allowing Adventists to take up arms. And some of them separated themselves from the body. Now, what they actually did is they voiced their concern about a decision and separated themselves. But the Bible clearly says that this body, with its faults and with its idiosyncrasies, will continue until the end, and then there will be a shaking. So what the Bible actually tells us then is that you should agitate for righteousness and reform within the body until the shaking, which is something that God does, takes place. And my opinion is that even though their reasons might have been perfectly legitimate, the separation was not in harmony with what the scriptures teach about the situation. After all, the scriptures give a pretty clear indication of what the state of the church is.
Yes.
It is poor, it is blind, it is wretched, it is naked, it needs eye salve, and it better buy some gold refined in the fire, or else it will be spewed out of the mouth, right?
Yeah.
Not a very good description of the final church.
No.
So it's not difficult to say, well, I don't want to be with this bunch. Well, if you take Daniel, he was part of that bunch. He suffered the consequences. He was taken and led to Babylon. He was put into the most dire circumstances. He was thrown to the lions. You mention it. His friends were thrown into the fiery furnace. Why?
Because they stood for what was right.
Okay. And what about their church?
Yeah, no.
Didn't they cause it?
Mhm.
By their decisions and
Yes.
by their wrong decisions and by their stubbornness?
Yep.
Well, it's not going to be any different here at the end.
Paul, why was he imprisoned in Jerusalem?
Exactly.
His own church.
His own church created the circumstances that led to his demise.
Yeah.
But he didn't separate
No.
himself. So this final body will go through to the kingdom, and God is going to shake it. So don't shake yourself beforehand.
There's another question that comes up to me now, that the shaking is a question that I heard, that how do you know the shaking is not to be out of the church, but in the shaking means you're shaken out.
If you're shaking something, well, actually, if you take the example that God uses is the threshing floor.
Yes.
There's pretty much of a shaking going on the threshing floor. But what remains on the threshing floor is the wheat.
Yes.
What is blown away is the chaff. Now, I've had many occasions when Reform Adventists have spoken to me, and there are very nice people amongst the Reform Adventists as well. But I've consistently told them that they should come to the main body. And why should I suffer alone in this body? Come and join us. So one of them once said to me, but it stinks in the body. And I said, yes, but get yourselves a clothes peg and put it on your nose. Because these are the circumstances that will exist until Christ comes, until this shaking takes place. And finally, you will have a remnant of a remnant that will proclaim the three angels' messages in power and not in variance as we have it today in many, many cases.
Yes. And that's, maybe you can also just then say, encouragement.
Yes, don't lose courage. And yes, stay within the body. I always say put glue, stay within the body until the shaking has taken
even
place.
if it looks like the ship is sinking.
Yeah, it will go through to the kingdom. There's an iceberg ahead, and we're going to hit it. And, we'll bear with those consequences because the captain is steering the ship towards the iceberg.
Amen.